Well, hello, my friends, and welcome back. My name is Stephanie Safarian, and you're listening to episode 495 of Sustainable Minimalists. This is a listener-supported show about intentional and eco-friendly minimalist living, and last week was a big week for science. Two very important studies were published last week. One was about the effects of phthalates in personal care products on our children, and the other has to do with ultra-processed foods. Are some worse for our health than others? The answer is yes. And so on today's show, if you are a free listener, we're talking about the first study, the phthalates in personal care products. What does emerging research have to say, and how can we protect ourselves, protect our children? That's for my free listeners. For my subscribers, you're doing all of that. So we're talking about phthalates. And then we're also talking about ultra-processed foods. Some foods are healthier than others. Some foods are unhealthier than others. That's for subscribers. A common thread on minimalism platforms, minimalist podcasts, is, of course, that excessive stuff harms our mental and emotional health. Excessive stuff, of course, results in extra stress, extra anxiety, oversized mental loads. Minimalism platforms also often tend to cite financial stress. Excessive buying leads to financial woes for many of us. But this platform, this show, the Sustainable Minimalist podcast, takes all of that, which I agree with 100%, but we take it a step further. The stuff we buy doesn't just harm our mental and emotional health and impact our financial states. It does all that, but it also could perhaps harm our physical health, because in many cases, the stuff we buy makes us sick. And the two brand new studies out last week aptly convey this point. So it behooves us to look critically at our purchases for our emotional well-being, absolutely, to reduce our mental loads 100%. But also, we should be looking critically at what we're buying so as to protect the physical health of ourselves and our family members. Now, I want to say, of course, it is really hard. It's difficult to prove that a product or a food item is causing deleterious health effects. And that's for a bunch of reasons. Number one, it's rarely a one and done exposure that leads to a negative health effect. Yes, there have been instances in the past in which a product is put onto the market and it is very clearly harming or, God forbid, killing people, and then it's removed from the shelf. But more often than not, it's consistent low-level exposure over years or over decades that leads to the deleterious health effect, like cancer, let's say. And by the time you get the diagnosis, years, decades have gone by. Whoever is going to prosecute that brand of body lotion you used back in your teenage years as the culprit? Who's going to first do the research and find conclusively that it had to do with the lotion, let's say? Nobody. So it's really hard to prove that one specific product is causing deleterious health effects 20 years from now. Okay. There's also the sad fact that the empirical evidence needed to determine that causal link is expensive. It's just not getting done by and large. And there's also the fact that gigantic corporations making these products have gigantic amounts of money to fight in court. I'm thinking about the Johnson & Johnson baby powder case, talc, ovarian cancer. Maybe you've heard some of that in the news. And so we can't wait on the FDA, on our regulatory bodies to step in and protect us. Here in America, it has been proven to us time and time again that we are pro-business, pro-corporation, perhaps at the expense of consumer health. And so to my free listeners, yes, today we're talking about phthalates in personal care products, and specifically phthalates with regard to our children, our babies, the products we're putting on our kids, and definitely our tweens and teens. There is a skincare craze going on right now, is there not? I know because I have a tween. But if you want to hear more about the foods problem, because it's the same thing, the stuff in the food is harming our health. That has been proved, especially in the ultra-processed food category. If you want to hear that, come on over and subscribe. This show is listener supported because I can no longer rely on ad revenue to fund this podcast. I just can't count on it. Financial supporters, $5 a month, $50 a year. You are the buffer to financial storms for this show. You're the sand dunes to the podcast shoreline. Horrible metaphor, I know, but I'm going with it. And perhaps you've noticed independent podcasts are folding left and right. Have you noticed? What's left in the podcasting space is increasingly big names or big celebrities or the podcasts that are run and backed by multi-million-dollar media organizations. And call me crazy, but one of the reasons I love podcasting as a medium is because, well, at least in the early days, podcasting celebrated small voices and diverse opinions. But now, guess what? The small voices and the diverse opinions are getting pushed out by those with the money, the clout, the power. So $5 a month, $50 a year is your way to ensure this podcast doesn't fold. I know money's tight. Trust me, I know. But every time another one of you switches from a free listener to a paid supporter, it's a little vote of confidence for me that people care. It's a pat on the back of sorts to keep this show going. If you listen on Apple Podcasts already, there's a button to subscribe there. Nothing changes for you. You get access to like a backdoor secret feed with ad-free and extended episodes like this one. This one's extended. If you don't listen on Apple Podcasts, there's Substack, in which ad-free episodes like today's go straight to your email. If you listen on Spotify, there are whispers that Spotify will be allowing subscriber-only audio in the upcoming future, but it's glitchy at the moment. So stay tuned, subscribe, listen on Substack for the time being. And then when Spotify gets its act together, you can just listen there like you've always been doing. So let's talk about phthalates. I'll say here too, we're going to talk about phthalates and we're going to talk about personal care products like lotions, like moisturizers, like shampoos marketed to kids. I'm also at the end going to list out the products that I have vetted and used with my children, on my children. So if you're interested in switching out to safer products, that's in the later part of today's show. But what are phthalates? I know you've heard of them. Let's remind ourselves. So those of you with me for years, you know what a phthalate is, but let's just all remind ourselves, get on the same page. Phthalates are a group of chemicals. They are often added to plastic to make plastic more flexible, more durable, the soft plastics in particular, right? Phthalates, though, are also used in personal care products. And you may be wondering, well, that doesn't make any sense. If phthalates are what makes plastic flexible, why on earth are they in, our shampoos and lotions? Well, phthalates are often added to personal care products for fragrance. Phthalates help carry fragrance, retain the scent. Phthalates are good for softening. It can soften the lotion, let's say, or whatever it is. Phthalates can help fix or hold a color. So if a company wants its product to be bubblegum pink, it's the phthalates that keep and retain the bubblegum pink color. Phthalates also are really great at skin penetration. Phthalates help products that we apply to our skin stick to the skin first and then enter through our skin barrier. Now, before we get into what existing research says on the impact of phthalates on human health, I want to make clear the point that only once in a blue moon will a product actually say the word phthalate in that ingredients list on the back of the bottle, let's say. I do wonder whether the word phthalate is not written out precisely because of the fact that consumers are becoming more educated and thereby more concerned. I don't know if that's the reason, but I am cynical by nature, so it very well might be. These days, companies in that ingredients list are writing acronyms for phthalates to throw us off. So instead of diethyl phthalate, right? The full name is diethyl phthalate. Instead of writing diethyl phthalate, on the ingredients list, you'll probably see the acronym DEP. Or instead of dibutyl phthalate, DBP. There's DMP, BBP, DNOP, DIDP. I could go on and on. But my point here, what is the take-home message? The point is that if you're turning over a bottle and you don't see the word phthalate anywhere, that does not mean that the product is phthalate-free. These companies and corporations are increasingly using acronyms, and unless you are a scientist well-versed in the additives used in personal care products, you may very likely not know that DEHP stands for 2-ethylhexyl phthalate, right? So, what does previous research say about phthalates? Well, spoiler alert, phthalates are endocrine disruptors. Endocrine disruptors mess with our hormones. They mimic or block or interfere with our body's own hormones. And if that doesn't sound like great news to you, it shouldn't. It's not great news. We do not want to be messing with our body's hormones unless, of course, your doctor gives you the go-ahead. I mean, birth control is an endocrine disruptor, right? If a healthcare provider gives you the green light to disrupt your hormones, then go for it. Absolutely. But we should not be messing with our endocrine system unknowingly, without intention. When it comes to children in particular, and babies and tweens, when it comes to any person going through rapid developmental changes, the concern is that phthalates, in this case, this specific group of endocrine disruptors, they might disrupt our hormones during key developmental moments. So the effects of the disruption are amplified, because the child, the baby, is going through a rapid period of developmental change. Now, prior studies have linked regular exposure to phthalates during pregnancy and early childhood to a host of negative impacts on children. I'm talking major negative impacts like impaired brain development, behavioral problems, plenty of health concerns. Let's also talk about children getting their periods earlier. When I was a kid, the potential culprit, let's say, was hormones in milk. These days, scientists are increasingly concerned whether it's the endocrine disrupting chemicals like phthalates that are in nearly everything we're buying and bringing into our homes that are contributing to our daughters getting their first menstrual cycles earlier and earlier. Now, I want to say, until now, concerns about phthalate exposure have often been centered around food because it's well known that phthalates can leach from flexible food packaging into food, and then, you and I, we consume the food and the phthalates are in the food. However, this new study, again, published last week, focuses not on the phthalates that kids are eating, but instead on the phthalates that they're putting on their bodies through personal care products. So this new study, it was published in the journal Environmental Health Perspectives. The full study is linked in this week's show notes, by the way. But researchers examined clinical data from 630 children, ages 4 to 8. They collected urine samples from these children, and their parents or guardians filled out surveys about hair and skincare products they had applied to the child in the past 24 hours. Researchers overwhelmingly found that phthalates enter our bodies through the skin barrier in alarming, keyword alarming concentrations. Now, phthalates don't stay in our bodies all that long, but when they're there, they can and sometimes do wreak havoc. Now, this study goes a step further because it found that there are differences in phthalate exposures by race and ethnicity. So, for example, this study found strong associations between the use of hair oils and elevated phthalate levels among children who identified as Hispanic, Asian, and Pacific Islander. Also, the use of body lotion was associated with the kinds of phthalates used as ingredients in personal care products among white children, but not among Black and Hispanic children. So researchers speculate that some of these differences may stem from the differences in the kinds of products that are marketed to different groups. I'm thinking hair products specifically marketed to Black children, let's say. More research is needed here, but overall, Black children had the highest level of phthalates in their urine. And again, why? The why is still unclear, but other studies have also found that many beauty products targeted at communities of color have high levels of phthalates. So we have to take our ad break, but when we come back, instead of a 10-step skincare regimen, I have a 5-step clean up your kids' personal care products like a sustainable minimalist regimen. I got to shorten that title, but I have my own 5-step regimen for you. Let's clean up the personal care products once and for all. We're going to do that after our quick sponsor break. And we're back. On today's show, we're discussing what new research says about phthalate exposure for children. I have my 5-step clean up your personal care products regimen coming up. But before we get there, I just want to very quickly talk about the tween and teen beauty skincare craze that's happening right this minute. What on earth should our tweens and our teens be putting on their faces? Let's just back up and say, teens, tweens, they have become major consumers of skincare products in the last 5 or 10 years. This trend is definitely fueled by social media. Young influencers are demonstrating their multi-step skincare routines. Oftentimes, those skincare routines feature products that are quite pricey. The problem, of course, in addition to the wasted money, is that kids and parents sometimes may not realize that some of these beauty products include ingredients that are bad for kids. Not only phthalates, but other ingredients that can harm the thin skin that is characteristic of preteens. They have not yet gone through puberty. Their skin is notoriously thin. And so they're putting on exfoliants, let's say, that are just too harsh for a tween's sensitive skin. Of course, though, those kid influencers with their 10-step routines, they aren't mentioning that, are they? They're probably having affiliate links there. They're getting a good kickback every time they make a sale. It's up to us parents to tell our kids that just because we see it on social media, just because our favorite beauty influencer is touting this product, that doesn't mean it's safe. So again, instead of that 10-step skincare regimen, I'm offering a 5-step clean up your skincare regimen for you today. Step 1, of course, parents. We need to know what our kids are putting on their bodies. For babies, for young kids, this is easy. We already know. We're probably putting this stuff on them ourselves, right? But for older kids, you may not know all the lotions and the hair gels and the exfoliators and the eye brighteners that they're slathering on every single day. So step 1 is to know what your kids are using. Once you know what your kids are using, then you go on to step 2 of clean up the regimen. This is a minimalism show, and step 2, it always is to minimize the amount of products being used. So let's say you have a 7-year-old, like I do. If you are lathering on 10 products on your 7-year-old each night, ask yourself, can you reduce that number by as many as you can to only the essentials? Is that detangler necessary? Does your 7-year-old need hair gel and hairspray every morning for school? These are questions to ask yourself. In the summer months when it's humid and it's not dry outside, does your child need lotion over every part of skin? Again, more questions to ask yourself. Maybe the answer is yes, but let's just start by asking the question. And for the questions where the answer is no, they don't need this, minimize it. Stop using it. That's step 2. Step 3 is to replace what you have decided is essential with safer versions. Okay, so for the stuff that you've decided is essential, you're going to swap those products out with safer versions. Now, you're wondering, well, how do I know what's safer? Yeah, I know that's a long process, so I'm here to help you out. I'm going to tell you what my children use, okay? And I'll say with the caveat, are these products perfect? Probably not. But are they heads and shoulders better than the other stuff on the market? Heck yes, they are. All right, so what do my kids use? They use shampoo, conditioner, sunscreen, toothpaste, soap, like body soap, and occasionally hairspray. That's it. That's all they use. Now I'm going to tell you exactly what they use. But I will say for shampoo and conditioner, they do not wash their hair every day. They wash their hair every maybe 3 to 4 days. Because again, I want to minimize their exposure to these products as much as possible, even though the products I'm using are safer. So for shampoo, they use Attitude Baby Leaves Shampoo. Attitude is a brand that I really love in general. Everything they put out tends to be safer. Attitude Baby Leaves. My older daughter, she has specific wants and needs with regard to her hair. So she often also uses my shampoo. I use Giovanni Golden Wheat Shampoo, linked in the show notes, all of this if you're interested. For conditioner, again, my kids use Attitude Super Leaves Conditioner. For sunscreen, I put sunscreen on their faces every single day, and I put on their faces the same sunscreen I put on my face, which is Kinship's sunscreen made with zinc oxide, linked in the show notes. Love it. For toothpaste, they use David's toothpaste, which I've mentioned on the show. Again, love it. It comes in a metal tube. They do not use mouthwash because I'm not convinced that any of the safer ones on the market are actually safe. They do not use mouthwash. Instead, I make sure they're really brushing their teeth. For soap, so when they're in the shower, what do they put on their body? They use a bar of Castile soap. Now, any brand of Castile soap will work for you, but my family, we are using Kirk's brand at the moment because it's the cheapest at the moment. When it comes to soap, I suggest you and your children go back to a bar. There is no need for body soap to be in plastic. Body soap, hand soap for that matter. There's the plastic problem, of course. We don't need to be willingly and unnecessarily contributing to the plastic crisis. But there's also generally the fact that when there's a bottle, again, generally, but when there's a bottle, there's more unnecessary ingredients within. Some of those ingredients might be harmful, but you won't know unless you turn the bottle over and do the research. And who has time to do the research, right? So just save yourself the headache and get yourself a bar of Castile soap. Done. Now, occasionally, if we're going somewhere fancy, I will put hairspray on my children. They use, and I use, Giovanni LA Hold hair spritz, again, linked in the show notes. And in the winter months, when their skin is dry and cracked, I use coconut oil on them as body lotion. We do not use traditional lotion. We use coconut oil, and it works just as well. I also use coconut oil as my makeup remover, by the way. But that's it. That's the products my kids use. Nothing more, nothing else. And step 4 in our cleanup regimen is for those products that you can't swap out. You can't swap it out because you just love it. Like a great example here for me is dry shampoo. My children can go 4 days without washing their hair, but I can't. So some days I really need some dry shampoo. And yes, I have tried the cornstarch and cocoa powder suggestion. It works all right, but sometimes I just don't want to smell like chocolate. I don't want to smell like cocoa powder. So, then there's the can of aerosol dry shampoo that's chock full of potentially hazardous chemicals. But I still have a container of that in my cabinet. If you can't swap it out because you just love the efficacy of the product, ask yourself, can you use less of it? So instead of a quarter-sized dollop of lotion, can you use a dime-sized dollop, let's say? Or in the case of my dry shampoo, instead of using it every day, can I use it twice a month? Can you use the product less? That's step 4. Again, minimizing, using less. And then finally, step 5, this step is the step for my tweens and teens. So if you have a teen or a tween, listen up. Teens think they're invincible, don't they? Talk to them about the concept of body burden. Talk to them about the fact that it's not necessarily about a one and done exposure. It's about low levels of exposure to not just phthalates, but also triclosan, also parabens. I mean, you name it. It's about low level exposure over a lifetime that tends to cause the deleterious health effects. There's no research done with regard to how phthalates interact with parabens and what that does inside our bodies. Remind your children that basic skincare for tweens and teens is a mild, gentle skin cleanser and maybe some moisturizer and definitely some sunscreen. That's it. Remind them also that a balanced diet and a good night of sleep is going to do wonders for their skin. Those are tried and true ways to have good skin. And if your children are wondering why influencers are touting those expensive products with their 10-step regimens, so 10 expensive products, it's likely because they're getting a kickback on every sale made. And of course, the kickback is bigger if the product's price tag is bigger. It all comes back to profit at the end of the day. It does not come back to what's best for your teenager. I also suggest, Christmas is coming up. Gift them an app. Gift them the Switch Natural app. I talked about Switch Natural, the app, and clean beauty products with Switch Natural's founder. I have the Switch Natural app and I love it. I'll link to that show in this week's episode. Maybe you suggest your teen listens to it. Perhaps you give them the Yuka app or the EWG app. So next time they're out and about at Sephora, they can scan either the barcode or the ingredients list, and you can empower them through the app to make smarter purchasing choices. I'll also say here too, parents, don't fund their personal care products hobby. Right? Don't be their blank check. If they're wanting to purchase what you consider to be extra and unnecessary and unsafe, don't buy it for them. Make them acquire the money to purchase the item themselves. So that's our 5-step cleanup regimen. Let's go through it one more time. Step 1, know what your kids are putting on their bodies. Step 2, minimize the number, the quantity of products being used. Step 3, replace what's essential with safer options. Step 4, minimize the amounts of the essential products, right? So use less. And then finally, step 5, talk to your tweens and teens. Don't fund their personal care products buying habit. My final word for today, when it comes to being somebody who buys stuff in 2024, it tends to come down to the more you know, the less you trust. And the less you trust, the less you buy, right? The less you buy. That's our show today. Subscribers, stay with me. We're talking about ultra-processed foods next. What does new research out last week say about ultra-processed foods? We're going there next. If you learned something, if I taught you something, if you're going to go about your life doing something differently because of what you heard on today's show, please consider supporting it with $5 a month or $50 a year. You are the buffer to make sure this show can weather financial storms, such as one that's going on right now in the podcasting ad market. Thank you so much. Reach out if you need me. I appreciate you. See you Thursday, and take care.